The moment I saw the audit alert, my stomach dropped like a bad elevator. It was late, 9:47 p.m. to be exact, and I was reviewing logs over chamomile tea, trying to ignore the muscle not blooming between my shoulders. I wasn't expecting sabotage. I was expecting the usual, maybe a bug in the complaint pipeline or another board member accidentally querying live violation data with a wrong filter. But this was a full schema clone attempt. Unauthorized source from the board's private server. I stared at the screen, blinked once, then clicked into the access log. It wasn't just a sandbox test. Someone had tried to run a mirror of the entire resident hub. The violation tracker, the fine collection engine, the voting portal, even the event scheduling scaffolding, like they were building a backup or planning a quiet heist on the community's entire enforcement machine. I didn't panic. You don't survive 15 years in this HOA nightmare by panicking. I took a screenshot, encrypted the event chain, and logged a private entry in my Valen HOA Systems LLC control panel. Then I sent a concise, professional note to President Barbara Kensington with a timestamp and escalation tag. Her response? Silence. Just like last time. Hey, before we go deeper, do me a quick favor. If you're still listening, take a second to subscribe and tap the like button. 97% of people listen to these HOA Karen stories without subscribing, and your support really helps bring more of these delicious takedowns to life. All right, let's keep going. The next morning, I did what I always did. I put on my slate gray blazer, grabbed a coffee I wouldn't drink, and stepped into the 8 a.m. board review meeting like nothing was wrong. Thursday meetings had become ritual in the Pinecrest Estates Community Center. I'd stand at the head of the long table, running the board through enforcement accuracy metrics, fine collection speed, and rollout timelines for version 3.1 of our complaint routing system. I knew which slides they'd tune out. I knew which ones Barbara would pretend to understand while scrolling her phone. And I always left one Easter egg buried in the appendix, a dummy metric labeled Latent Violation Drift Anomaly Impact Class E. No one ever asked. I wasn't angry. I was detached, like watching someone carelessly toss around a porcelain vase and thinking, one day it'll break. Just a matter of when. I'd built the vase. I'd designed the kiln. I'd written the damned glaze formula. And none of them ever read the label. The thing is, the Pinecrest Estates HOA didn't own the kiln or the glaze or the fire that forged the whole thing. 15 years ago, I was just a junior resident volunteer with a stubborn streak and a nighttime obsession with modular community systems. So I registered Valen HOA Systems LLC and coded the foundational layers of the resident hub spine under its umbrella. The HOA licensed the framework every year under a usage-only agreement. Non-transferable, non-editable, renewal-based. They never read it. Just sign the doc every fiscal Q1 like clockwork. Why did I do it that way? Because the first time someone tried to take credit for my work back when I was 28 and still thought HOA fairness was real, I learned the hard way that attribution isn't protection. Ownership is. And I own this. Quietly, fully, legally. So when Vice President Derek Voss tried to clone my system without authorization, he wasn't just violating protocol. He was triggering Clause 7.4b in the agreement. Replication of licensed architecture outside authorized nodes constitutes grounds for immediate termination of access, which meant I had options. A lot of them. I left the Thursday meeting without saying a word. Barbara had spent most of it tapping at her phone anyway. One of the other board members had interrupted to suggest integrating a third-party cheap fine generator bot he'd seen on some HOA Facebook group, something he clearly didn't understand but had read about in a viral post titled, "Automate Your Karen Power." No one noticed the tightening in my jaw when he called my work legacy scaffolding. No one asked why I skipped slide 14 entirely. That night I sat at my desk and opened a blank message. Subject line, Framework Inquiry. Private Use Discussion. Recipient, Lauren Kai, Director of Summit Resident Management, Pinecrest's biggest rival in community services. My finger hovered for just a moment, then I hit send. She didn't even bother to close her email tab. I watched the read receipt bounce while she scrolled with two fingers and smirked like I'd asked for a unicorn instead of a raise that wouldn't even cover the cost of HOA dues these days. 15 years through 3 board purges, 5 community enhancement relaunches, a failed special assessment that gutted half the landscaping budget, and a power grab that gutted half the decent neighbors. I stayed. I worked weekends. I patched production on Christmas Eve when the fine system crashed because someone's Christmas lights were 3 days past the allowed window. I trained every fresh-out-of-college board brat they threw in my direction. And I did it because I believe in the architecture, not the people who rented their titles above mine. Lauren leaned back in her absurd ergonomic chair, one of those $1,000 mesh-backed monstrosities the finance committee approved for posture, and gave me a smile I can only describe as bored cruelty, like I was interrupting her day by asking for the bare minimum. 10%, she said, blinking like the words had personally offended her. Then came the chuckle, soft at first, then louder and sharp enough to draw the attention of the assistant outside her glass-walled office. You're lucky we haven't automated your job already. And then the kicker, everyone's replaceable. She waved her hand like she was swatting away a mosquito. If you're unhappy, there's the door. There was no malice in her voice. That's what made it worse. It was mechanical, rehearsed, like she'd said the same thing to 5 other volunteers that week and hadn't bothered to remember any of their names. Just a box to tick on the cost-cutting checklist. She assumed I'd sit there, maybe bargain, maybe beg. She assumed I was trapped, some aging homeowner clinging to a role because I didn't know how to reinvent myself like the new residents with their Tesla solar roofs and I'm just here for the pool attitude. But the thing about assuming people are stuck, you stop noticing when they've already left. I didn't argue, didn't flinch. I just smiled and said one word, understood. Then I stood, walked out, and forwarded 2 files from my company account to my encrypted private inbox. The first, the full development license agreement between Pinecrest Estates, HOA, and Vallon HOA Systems, LLC. Usage only, annual renewal, non-transferable, non-replicable under Clause 7.4b. My name, my LLC, their signatures. The second, the internal log chain showing Derek Voss's unauthorized attempt to clone the entire framework stack 4 nights earlier. The timestamp on that violation was clear as glass. I saved the emails in a dated folder, added one more layer of encryption, and closed my laptop. That night I didn't sleep, but not from anxiety. I was calm, focused like a switch had flipped. Not anger, not vengeance, just alignment. For the first time in years, I saw everything clearly. Pinecrest didn't deserve what I'd built, and they certainly didn't own it. They thought they were sitting on top of a gold mine with my resident hub propping up every fine, every vote, every community improvement they pitched to terrified homeowners. But they never read the deed. They were just tenants. Arrogant ones. And the lease was about to end. I woke up early the next morning and brewed real coffee for the first time in months. Black. No sugar, bitter like honesty. My inbox was already active. Lauren Kai had replied, "Let's meet today. I'll clear my afternoon." Attached was a calendar invite for Summit Resident Management's downtown office. I looked over at my Pinecrest board badge on the kitchen counter, flipped it over, and dropped it in the drawer. My calendar still said Performance Review Follow-Up Q&A for noon. Instead, I picked a darker blazer, pulled up my system access portal, and quietly began preparing the one-click revocation protocol embedded in the framework. They thought I'd ask twice. They'd never read what I wrote in the margins. We met at a tucked-away cafe 2 blocks from Summit's office, the kind of place with minimalist decor and absurdly expensive espresso that no one actually drinks. They just ordered to signal taste. Lauren walked in 10 minutes early. No entourage, no airs, just a steel-cool pantsuit and a presence that filled the room before she spoke. She shook my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I've been waiting for this message for 3 years." I didn't waste time with flattery or drama. I slid my laptop across the table and opened the sandbox environment. Loaded up the latest build of my modular framework. Live demo, 0 latency, explainability layer embedded, federated pipeline pre-integrated. She leaned in, absorbed the structure in silence. Then, still not blinking, said, "You wrote this whole thing." "I designed it, built it, licensed it, updated it alone for over a decade." Lauren closed the laptop slowly, sat back, and said, "We'll offer you advisory CTO, $600K base, 2% equity. You define the roadmap. You own your tech. Your call. No pitch, no seduction, just respect." And that was the first real offer I'd had in 15 years. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to think it over. I'd done the thinking already, every Thursday at 8 a.m., under the dead eyes of board members who never even asked why the violation metrics had stabilized or how the complaint segmentation engine had gone from 82% to 94.7% accuracy over 3 quarters. I signed the term sheet that night, date stamped, countersigned, encrypted. On the Uber ride home, I opened my VPN, authenticated into the Pinecrest compliance portal, and pulled up the license control panel. Their rights to Valen HOA systems architecture were set to expire end of quarter, but Clause 9.3 gave me the right to immediate termination in the event of breach, with replication attempt logs as evidence. I uploaded the audit trail from Derek Voss, appended Barbara's dismissive comment from the review, then toggled the revocation flag. One click. Their access expired at 11:41 p.m. No warning. No drama, no explosion, just quiet disconnection. The resident hub detached from their systems instantly. Usage calls redirected to a dead endpoint. The scaffolding began freezing processes as soon as the heartbeat pings failed. They wouldn't even know it until morning. I stared at the screen for a minute longer. No sense of revenge, no joy, just clean removal. Like pulling a key from a lock and watching the gears go still. I powered down the laptop and stood at the window, watching the cul-de-sac blink like nothing had happened. Pinecrest thought they'd cut dead weight. They had no idea I was the spine, and now they were spineless. The first flags came in around 7:12 a.m. Pacific. Automated violation notices stopped rendering across half the neighborhood grid. The system defaulted to static tables 2 quarters out of date, which meant someone's perfectly manicured lawn at 3.1 inches was suddenly flagged as compliant, while the guy with the pink flamingos got a polite "welcome back" email instead of the usual $250 fine. Then the personalization engine buckled. New violators were being funneled into deprecated segments. One single dad who'd only ever bought motorcycle oil and Bluetooth speakers received a welcome back promo for the annual family movie night addressed to Mrs. Johnson and her adorable toddlers. Support tickets exploded. By 10 a.m., the board's group chat was crawling with messages, mostly from sleep-deprived volunteers trying to patch the failures with zero visibility. Cache refreshes, database rollbacks. Someone even suggested hard-coding static fallback paths like it was 2012. Again, didn't matter because my framework wasn't a plug-in. It was the scaffolding, the spine, the invisible lattice that held their entire rule enforcement logic, fine orchestration, and complaint routing together. Remove it, and it didn't just fail, it unraveled. At 10:43 a.m., someone in the treasurer's office finally checked the dependency graph and realized half the services were routing through calls that no longer existed. By 11:30, one of the mid-level volunteers posted the message that made it clear they were truly screwed. Why are the rule weights encrypted now? Who authorized this change? No one answered, because no one in that community center had the keys. Meanwhile, I sat in a quiet corner of Summit's 10th floor office. New badge, new laptop, clean terminal. Lauren had offered me the corner office. I declined. Said I'd rather sit where I could hear the product team chatter. You can't lead innovation from an ivory tower. You lead it by listening. I watched the Pinecrest fallout unfold in real time through neighborhood Facebook threads, resident screenshots, and one particularly damning next-door post from a former board ally who tagged Barbara directly and asked, "Is your HOA drunk or just broken?" No one from their PR team, Barbara's cousin, responded. They were too busy figuring out why a neighborhood, supposedly built on perfect order, suddenly couldn't enforce a single blade of grass. By noon, the volunteer support line had logged over 400 complaints. Revenue projections, aka fine income, started slipping. The midday ops Zoom, usually a sleepy call where 3 people pretended to be alert, turned into a silent war zone. I knew exactly how that room looked, who sat where, which board member would blame legacy systems, and which one would quietly text a realtor during the chaos. But none of them would point to the license clause buried in the share drive. None of them would say the words, "We lost her, and she took the architecture." And me? I didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't even forward the group chat screenshot a friend sent me from the inside. I just opened a new file on my IDE and began sketching the foundation for Gen 2. Because this wasn't a victory lap. This was a rebuild. By Monday morning, the rot had spread everywhere. The monthly newsletter was first to crack. Their automated blast tools stopped serving variant campaigns, reverting to the fallback, "Welcome to Pinecrest Estates" template last edited during a leadership rebrand that featured a now-disgraced treasurer. Every email blast went out without segmentation, without personalization, and worst of all, without context. Residents in the North Cul-de-sac were getting promos for winter holiday lights in July. One retiree forwarded a screenshot to half the board with the subject line, "Do you even know who lives here anymore?" Then the fine collection team started screaming. Lead scores. All the automated violation priorities defaulted to 0. Account prioritization tools showed red exclamation marks or nothing at all. The enterprise CRM sync failed outright. One volunteer tried refreshing the dashboard and instead got a blank screen with a single line of text. Endpoint not found. Operations was next. Procurement schedules for community events drifted. Fulfillment models dumped predictive ordering, and a partner forecast ran an ancient script that backordered 3,000 units of discontinued, approved garden gnomes. Someone tried restoring last week's instance from cache. The models came back mangled, dependencies broken, data pathways corroded. That's when the panic call started. At 10:17 a.m., Barbara called an emergency huddle. She hated video calls, always insisted on in-person, but this time it was on Zoom. Her voice tight, her blouse rumpled. Legal joined 5 minutes in, camera off, voice level. They pulled up the development license agreement on a shared screen. She revoked usage at 7:41 p.m. Friday, legal said flatly, Clause 7.4b, breach via unauthorized replication attempt. The agreement was never converted to perpetual. You let it lapse. Silence. The treasurer, still green, still pretending he could code, blinked like he was seeing snow. Wait, she could just cut it off. She owned it, legal said. We licensed annually and we breached. Then the final invoice was screen shared. My invoice. There was no snark, no passive-aggressive commentary, just the subject line crisp and direct. Termination due to executive hostility, Clause 7.4b. It sat there unmoving while 23 people silently realized what had happened. Some stared. Others looked away. Barbara wasn't on the call. Of course she wasn't. Then came the second reveal. Buried at the end of the compliance packet, metadata logs from my watchdog script, a silent listener embedded inside the framework from the very beginning. Its sole purpose, to detect unauthorized mirroring attempts and auto-report them to my legal proxy. It had fired 4 times in total, all 4 from the same user, Derek Voss. Each attempt logged, time-stamped, routed to the escrow archive. They hadn't just lost a framework. They'd triggered its self-defense protocol. The treasurer took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose like it physically hurt. She gave us everything, he muttered. And we mocked her. No one disagreed because now they all saw the same thing. I wasn't just a volunteer who got tired of being overlooked. I was the architect, the keeper of the very structure they'd leaned on. And now that it was gone, all they had left was a broken shell and a framework that answered to someone else. By Wednesday, Pinecrest's internal dashboards weren't just broken. They were empty. The team had tried rebooting the rule orchestration layer that morning, hoping for a miracle. Instead, they got a white screen with one stark line across the top. Framework deactivated. Licensing expired. Contact vendor. No loading spinner. No recovery script. Just silence. Support volunteers pinged each other across group chats that had gone from mildly frantic to full-on DEFCON 2. Managers clung to ancient PDF exports. The fine team huddled in calls trying to guess which violations might be hot based on neighbor gossip and gut feelings. The newsletter kept refreshing their visual dashboards like maybe, just maybe, the next load would bring back segmentation logic or predictive tags. It didn't. One by one, board members gave up and walked into the main conference room where Barbara sat stone-faced at the end of the table, laptop open, jaw tight. No scarf, no usual clicky pen, just the raw choking sound of panic, trying to pretend it still had leverage. I want this reinstated, she snapped, pointing to the banner like sheer authority might bully the pixels back into compliance. Reverse it now. Legal had already joined via speakerphone. Her voice came through flat, neutral. She didn't breach. You did. Clause 7.4b. She executed her right to terminate under breach conditions. The framework is proprietary. We were renters. You mocked the landlord. The treasurer sat beside her, head down. A legal pad full of chicken scratch notes he'd stopped pretending to understand. He muttered, "You mocked her." She was the architecture. Barbara didn't respond. Maybe because there wasn't a comeback that would change the truth. Maybe because she realized too late that her smirk didn't scale. Meanwhile, I wasn't in that room. I was at Summit's downtown studio, surrounded by fresh whiteboards and a team of 6 engineers who were actually listening, really listening, as I laid out the modular core for Gen 2. The new system would be faster, leaner. Not because I had something to prove to Pinecrest, but because for the first time in years, I had the freedom to build without begging for understanding. My name was on every flow diagram. This time no one would erase it. Back at Pinecrest, one of the junior volunteers, the sharp kid, probably the only one who ever asked me about back-end Chardang on his own time, dug through a snapshot from last week's feature sprint deck. He zoomed into a chart of the model stack and paused. There it was, barely visible in the lower corner of the render, embedded like a quiet signature. Valen HOA Systems IP 2011 to 2026. He screenshot it, posted it to the volunteer chat. No commentary, just the image. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly everyone understood it had never been Pinecrest to own, only to borrow. And they hadn't just lost a product, they'd lost the source. And the source had moved on. The forensic sweep started the same way most desperation moves do, with someone in legal saying, "We should review the original correspondence." That's HOA code for, "We might have screwed this up years ago. Let's see how bad it really is." So they dug through threads, attachments, revision history, and a dozen email archives that had never been properly retention flagged. And there it was in plain text. My original pitch deck from 2014, 78 slides, clean logic trees, modular flowcharts, usage thresholds, and a license structure that mirrored modern software-as-a-service architecture before half the board even knew what containerization meant. They'd skimmed it back then, maybe read the summary page, definitely never opened the appendix where I detail the risk matrix around IP breach and renewal cycles. What they did find, and forwarded internally in a firestorm of BCCs, was an email from Barbara dated 2 weeks after the pitch. Subject line, Resident Hub Proposal, Initial Review. Her message was short, casual, looks clever but overbuilt. I doubt this framework has long-term viability. Let's move forward but avoid overinvesting. We'll replace it eventually. That line hit different now, because the framework they dismissed as temporary had powered 92% of their rule enforcement, fine revenue, voting integrity, and community harmony for over a decade. And now it was gone. The team they'd assembled to absorb the transition was already falling apart. My designated replacement, a kid with a dual master's and a TikTok habit, had lasted 4 days before submitting his resignation. Apparently, he opened the system route, realized he had zero access to weight initialization, no permissions for training pipeline management, and the rule store scripts were password protected behind infrastructure he couldn't even map. His final group chat message read, "Respectfully, this isn't a recovery job. It's an autopsy." By Thursday, the board was asking questions. A red folder made its way into Barbara's hands containing printed snapshots from the old dev wiki, last cached the day before my departure. One entry stood out, system root, valen.is.admin local. Access revoked unless renewal signed. No one had noticed it. Or maybe they had and assumed it was just a placeholder domain. But it wasn't. It was a hard-coded license-gated root trigger, a single line sitting in plain sight for years, waiting. I didn't see the fallout firsthand. Didn't want to. I was too busy watching the Gen 2 orchestration layer at Summit hit 98.2% test efficiency in Sandbox. The team clapped. Someone brought champagne. I took a sip and got back to work. Because I wasn't gloating. I didn't need to. My absence did all the talking. The call came just after 6 p.m. I recognized the number immediately, though I deleted it weeks ago. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, forced calm wrapped around a throat full of damage control. "I wanted to talk," she said, like we were old friends navigating a misunderstanding over coffee, not a president whose arrogance had gutted her neighborhood's neural spine. "We've been reviewing everything. There's no question you were integral. We acted hastily. That's clear now." I didn't say anything. She filled the silence. "We'd like to bring you back as executive advisor. Triple your prior stipend. Fully remote. Set your own schedule. No direct reports. Just strategic oversight. Autonomy. You'd have autonomy." I almost laughed. Autonomy? The thing I'd carved for myself while they called me overcautious. Called the framework bloated. Called my license terms unnecessary complexity. She didn't realize the offer wasn't insulting. It was hollow, like building a throne out of ash. "I already gave my loyalty," I said, voice even. There was a pause. She didn't try to argue. That surprised me. Then she said, "What would it take?" And that was when the shift happened. The moment she understood I wasn't walking back through that door, not even for triple the money or a polished new title. I wasn't a volunteer anymore. I was the vendor now. So I gave her the only thing I'd left to offer, the price. "I can refer you to a third-party consultant," I said. "They'll manage a secure license for a limited version of the framework. Firewalled, read-only model access, no customization, quarterly renewals, triple the original fee." Another pause. "Is that really necessary?" I didn't answer because she already knew. You don't burn the bridge and then haggle over the toll to cross the river you set on fire. They accepted, of course. They didn't have a choice. Pinecrest wasn't limping. It was clinically dead, and their fine revenue projections were about to follow if something didn't plug the holes. I looped in a trusted contact, someone who knew the framework but wasn't emotionally tied to the wreckage. She signed the NDA. They signed the license. My LLC collected its first quarterly payment 2 days later. On time, no questions. And just like that, the architect they discarded was now the name on their invoices. A week later, someone forwarded me a PDF of their new internal roadmap deck. Initiative title, Resilience. Cute. The launch barely got off the ground. Their PR team pushed out a blog post about rediscovering core values and prioritizing long-term stability. It got 27 likes on Nextdoor and was promptly buried under a comment thread asking why Pinecrest violation notices were still broken. Meanwhile at Summit, Gen 2 moved into final deployment. The difference wasn't just technical, it was cultural. People actually asked questions. They documented. They listened. They didn't pretend to understand things they didn't. And more importantly, they didn't punish me for being the one who did. I didn't rub any of it in. I didn't need to, because Pinecrest had finally learned the lesson they tried so hard to avoid. You can't enforce order on top of contempt. And you can't buy back loyalty once you've taught someone what their absence really costs. 6 weeks later, we went live. No countdown clock, no pyrotechnics, no internal champagne stunt with the board pretending they understood backpropagation. Just a clean deployment at scale. And it worked. The model didn't just match Pinecrest's old numbers. It obliterated them. 30% lift in enforcement accuracy. 40% reduction in drift. Time to violation notice down by half. Residents noticed quietly at first. Emails with subject lines like "quick queue on a new system" and "your app just nailed our block party planning." Then came the calls, the contracts, the conversions. And at the bottom of every resident dashboard in muted gray font sat a simple line of text. Core engine by Valen HOA Systems. Licensed exclusively through Summit Resident Management Incorporated. They saw it. Barbara definitely saw it because that week a mid-level volunteer posted a Nextdoor update celebrating resilience through challenge, trying to spin the silence in their Q3 roadmap into some kind of strategic patience. No one bought it. At the annual Pacific HOA Tech Summit was featured on day 2. Lauren took the stage. No slides, no fluff, just her in a charcoal blazer, calm as steel. "Here's what we've learned," she said. "HOA isn't magic. It's architecture. And architecture has architects. Respect the builders or watch them walk." The room went still. The camera panned to the crowd. Some clapped. Some sat frozen. And in the third row, I caught a glimpse of someone from Pinecrest, pale, unsmiling. I watched the live stream from my new office. No glass walls, no performative corner desk, just real tools, a real team, and my own damn name on the project folder. I didn't grin, didn't toast, didn't text a single "told you so." I just leaned back, let the moment breathe, and took one long, quiet inhale. This wasn't revenge. It was realignment. They dismissed me as replaceable. But what they never understood, what they still don't understand, is that control doesn't vanish. It evolves. When the architect chooses where to rebuild, the neighborhood finally gets the rules it deserves.